Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us to Learning and Teaching Social Justice Online, Striving for Sustainability here at the 33rd Annual ADEIL Conference. I am Teresa Leary Handy, your session host, and today's session will run for about 45 minutes, including time for question and answers at the end. We are so happy to have Rose Singh, who is going to be presenting her session today. Rose is our 2024 Research Award winner for the ADEIL organization, and she is a PhD candidate at the Memorial University and a sessional lecturer at Dalhousie University. She teaches courses focusing on critical approaches to theory, practice, and policy. With over 2 decades of experience in the social service sector, Rose is also a practicing social worker. Rose's research and interests center on social work education, social justice, disabilities, online learning and teaching, and emerging technologies. Additionally, Rose was awarded the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council Doctoral Fellowship in 2023-24 and the Memorial University Dean's Excellence Award 2023 to 2024, as well as she is the recipient of the Memorial University Peter Mackey Memorial Graduate Scholarship, the Memorial University Olivia Lewis and Michael Leonardo Graduate Scholarship, and the Memorial University Graduate Student Union Award for Excellence in Research. We are so pleased to have you here. You are definitely a scholar, and we cannot wait to hear what you have to say to us today. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you, Dr. Handy. And thank you to those that are joining live or via the recording. It's greatly appreciated that you're here. And let's get started. So a quick check-in in terms of access needs. So we have the slides here as the visual. We have the chat. We have our microphones. There's captioning available via Zoom, but if there's anything else that would be helpful and you're comfortable sharing, please either private message myself or Dr. Handy, or if you're comfortable sharing, add it in the chat of what can we do to make this session as accessible as possible. Another thing that I typically start presentations with, especially if folks are joining via audio only, or they may also be low vision or visually impaired, is to offer a visual description of myself. So again, my name is Rose. I'm wearing glasses. I have a red shirt on. I have dark hair. And I have a bookshelf behind me with books that should be returned to the library pretty soon and some Lego flowers, amongst other things. So again, if there's anything that can be added to make this presentation and space as accessible as possible, please, again, if you're comfortable sharing, let us know via the chat or share along the way. And Dr. Handy already provided a introduction, and thank you for sharing my bio. And again, a little bit about me is that I'm a PhD candidate at Memorial University, which is located in Canada. And I'm a longtime practicing social worker. So I've been working in the social services or social work field for about 24 years. And a one-time distance education student myself, then a distance teaching assistant, and later online educator. And I share that as it was really foundational to the research that I undertook for my PhD. And before I get into that, I wanted to pause and share some really important acknowledgements. It was a huge honor to receive this award. Last year, when I joined the conference to receive the award virtually, it's there was so much love in this space, this shared love of online learning and teaching, hybrid digital learning and teaching context. And I could tell that everyone understood what I was doing, and that was so appreciated. And along the way, so Dr. Handy, Haley, everyone who was involved with the award process, everyone who's involved in making these conferences happen. Again, a great honor to be here and greatly appreciated. And also, Dr. Handy shared some of this in my bio, but the additional support that I have received along the way. So, again, being a graduate student who's coming back to school later in life, um, balancing many things, having great mentors, my PhD supervisory committee, the people who participated in my research, the Shirk Fellowship I received, and any awards I received along the way had greatly helped me to be able to get to this point. So again, a big thank you to, it's not an individual endeavor. It is a bigger endeavor to do this. And again, a big thank you to everyone who's been involved and supported me in some way. So I planned this session to be interactive, not only to provide a bit of an overview of the doctoral research that I undertook that underlies the session and that I received the award for, but also to engage in dialogue with you around how do you conceptualize social justice and sustainability in online education? And what might be some sustainable practices, some sustainable strategies that we can imagine or share that are applicable to your own learning and teaching contexts? So I'll invite you at different points throughout this presentation to either share in the chat, to use your microphone, or to reflect amongst yourselves, whatever you're most comfortable doing, as we have these points of interaction and sharing and imagining together. I greatly appreciated the keynote speaker setting the stage for this whole conference and, of course, this presentation. So to take a moment in the spirit of the conference theme to pause and to be together, to pause and to take a breath, to reflect, to be present, to express gratitude, and more. So if there's anything that you're taking a pause for, please feel free to share.
Okay, I know Rose can't see the chat, so Jerry shared to appreciate each other and this time together. Yes. And I will be honest, I am very grateful that Richard's picture popped up, reminded me to record the session. Believe it was like a trigger. So I was very
Thank,
grateful for that.
Happy to help however I can.
Yes,
thank
thank
you
you.
both.
Thank you.
And I think
That's all that's in the chat.
thank you. And yes, I actually have the chat sort of on a corner side of my screen now. So, but if I certainly appreciate the assistance and reading it too. And again, this pause is intentional. And I feel that this is an incredible opportunity to come together, learn, to share, and take a break from the usual hectic schedules I imagine all of us have. One of the roles I have outside of my academic work, like I said, I'm a practicing social worker and I work as a counselor and a therapist. So it's not only to speak to people about these practices, but also I'm not going to ask people to do things I wouldn't do myself. So we don't have enough time to be able to pause and reflect. We're always asked to do more in smaller amounts of time. So creating intentional spaces where we can be together and to, yeah, just take a breath. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to this for those of us that are here live? And I will add that during the session, feel free to practice these things as well. So next, I will provide a bit of an overview of my doctoral research, like I said, which underlines this session. The study was titled Learning and Teaching Social Injustice or Social Justice in Online Social Work Education. As mentioned, I had been a distance student. I was working and going back to school to continue my education. I was working in the social services sector while continuing my social work education. And distance learning was the way that I was able to do this. And so that created the foundation for my passion for learning and teaching in online education. Later, I got to be a teaching assistant online and then an online educator. And one of the first courses I taught in the online context was focused on social justice. And I had taught on campus at a different institution, but it was that online learning and teaching experience about social justice that was very unique and distinct. And for social work, just to give a bit of background, if you're not familiar with social work, the profession is centered in terms of our practice, our codes of ethics, our values, state social justice, and working towards social justice is a real foundational and uniting stance within the profession. However, the pedagogical research related to learning and teaching social justice in online education is very limited. And that inspired me to undertake my doctoral research in this area. I felt when I started teaching the social justice courses this huge responsibility. And it was also this particular course at the institution I was teaching at, it was the first course that students were teaching as they entered their social work undergraduate degree. They had, in this particular program, they had already taken an undergraduate degree, so it was a second entry bachelor's, but this was their introduction to the profession and our values, our ethics, our practices, as I said, centered around social justice and other aspects of social work as well. My guiding research questions for this research were, How are social work students learning, and how are social work educators teaching social justice and online asynchronous social work courses? And I focused in on the Canadian context. And what actions could be taken to improve learning and teaching social justice in online asynchronous social work courses? So I focused in on asynchronous courses, meaning that at least 80% of the time was asynchronous. Because again, there was that experience that I was grounding myself in of this is a very different way of learning and teaching, I believed and wanted to explore than, say, hybrid or synchronous or other models and approaches that are taken. And my doctoral research was based in a critical theoretical framework, critical pedagogies, so drawing on Freire, Guru, Hooks, all these incredible scholar activists, an action research methodology. And I used online data collection, digital storytelling, online data analysis with research participants who elected to be part of this and selected to be part of this process. And altogether, there were 12 social work students comprising of 7 recent or previous social work students. So they had taken a social justice, social work course asynchronously online within the last 2 years of when I was collecting data. And then there were also 5 current social work students, as well as 9 social work educators. So these encompassed both contract or sessional lecturers or full-time tenure track faculty. So I was very fortunate to have research participants or digital storytellers, as I refer to them, from across Canada, as again, there's distance or online courses that are run across the country. And the intent for this research was to contribute to the knowledge base on social justice and social work education. So not only to better understand what do we mean by social justice and social work, to highlight pedagogical practices and aligned with action research to improve learning and teaching social justice and online education. So some brief highlights of what I learned from the research participants or digital storytellers. They shared their own definitions and descriptions of social justice and social injustice. And social justice was conceptualized as equity, inclusion, opportunities for all, distributed resources, no prejudice or discrimination based on identity or social location, and the eradication of social injustices. And social justice in online education, what was highlighted by the digital storytellers was access, inclusion, accessibility, building connection, and building community. And if you're willing to share, how do you conceptualize social justice? How do you conceptualize social justice in online education? So while my study was unique to social work, it is interesting to consider how this occurs in related professional programs. I certainly drew on the literature from other professional programs or in other disciplines as well. So if you are willing to take a moment to reflect, to share, please do so.
I think one of the ways that I really conceptualize it is through the use of open educational resources in my courses.
Mm, hmm.
I've taken, um, that's one of my latest research projects is to really focus on how do we engage students, increase the sense of belonging through the use of open educational resources. And then what does that look like? Because words like social justice and equity, those are all buzzwords now
Hmm.
will get you in trouble in some places, right? In our country. I know you're in Canada.
Hmm.
So I think that being mindful of how we can meet those goals without using certain language has become really paramount to that. And so one of the ways that I do it is through open educational resources.
Dr. Handy, that's such a great example. And it's in reading and listening to participants' responses, there is so much and so many different ways of how social justice is either described or operationalized. And you gave a great example of how do we actually do social justice work in online learning and teaching settings. And I just saw there's some chat messages. The the opportunity to lower barriers, scaffolding and support, equitable and accessible, inclusive learning environments. Thank you all. I will continue. For sustainability, I'm really inspired by the disability justice movement and principles as led by Sins Invalid. And I've quoted their disability justice principle of sustainability. There's 10 disability justice principles in total, but I've quoted the sustainability disability justice principle here is that we pace ourselves individually and collectively to be sustained long term. Our embodied experiences guide us toward ongoing justice and liberation. And if you're not familiar with the disability justice movement or principles, I encourage you to look up the website by Sins Invalid and to perhaps also be inspired. And another moment of reflection, microphone, or chat is how do you conceptualize sustainability and specifically sustainability in online education? Thank you for your chat contribution. So, meeting needs of the present without compromising. The question of, is what's being asked of instructors and students realistic and sustainable? Absolutely. And then next, chat contribution. Just keeping it as a priority and creating opportunities to do a temperature check on efforts towards the goal. Thank you all. And I'll continue with sharing responses with what the research participants and digital storytellers shared. It was extremely important to many of the educators involved and also students for the recognition of the distinctness of the online learning and teaching context. Also, in line with that, that there was support for the unique opportunities and challenges that were arising in learning and teaching about social justice or social injustice in the online environment. So there was the request to have more opportunities for individual support. So are there meetings? Are there informal, formal conversations that educators could have around those unique challenges that were arising? And much of that that was identified had to do with the content of what was being taught and how that was being taken up by learners in the classroom. So to have that support of, if we're teaching and learning about topics that were new to students, maybe they hadn't come across before, they hadn't reflected on in that way before, that there was that support around that learning and teaching that was happening, but particular to the online context, because the same kinds of conversations couldn't be facilitated as they could have been in an online classroom. There was also a request and identification to have group type support settings. So an example was shared of when we're social work practitioners, we might have something called groups or supervision or peer supervision, where a number of us get together to discuss confidentially, of course, ways to best approach the work that we do, and if that could be mirrored in a learning and teaching context. And so to have a group setting that could offer that type of support to discuss the challenges that were arising in teaching about social justice and social injustice, and to share what are some of the ways that educators were doing this and what were some of those opportunities they could identify to improve their teaching and learning practices. And also communities of practice. So the distinctness again of courses that had social justice and were addressing social injustices, that was there a way to bring together instructors who were doing online teaching in these particular types of courses from across a geographic span together to bring that support, share practices and go about improving how they were doing this, and could they do that together? Something that came up from several of the educators who participated in the study was compensation for guest speakers with lived experience. So many of the online educators wished to bring in people who had direct lived experience with social justice issues or injustices, who were involved in social justice activism, but not surprisingly, there wasn't any funds to be able to compensate these people. And so to counter that, sometimes instructors or educators were having to compensate them themselves. And it was identified how valuable by both educators and students these guest speakers were, but the need to ensure that folks were being compensated for their time if they were coming online to speak to a virtual class or create a recording that could be shared with the virtual class. And the wish for tools and technology to to build sustainability with the learning and teaching process. And so creative ways to bring social justice issues into the class, to the course, and then extend it back into communities. So the online educators and students in the study were like just imagining, like, how can we do social justice work virtually in our asynchronous course and then have that go back into community? So as technologies arise and new tools come, what are some ways that we can do that in a sustainable way? Because again, it might require a lot of resources. It may require a lot of extra time on the part of, say, contract instructors, or if there isn't the teaching support built into an institution. So again, what are some ways to creative use tools to, um, you know, extend that online learning and bring it back into the community and vice versa. So those are some highlights of what the participants shared. In particular, like I said, when I think about sustainability. So again, bringing it back to you of if you can take a moment to reflect, to share via the microphone or the chat, sustainable strategies and practices applicable to your learning and teaching context. The research that I shared was related to primarily asynchronous online education in the discipline of social work. But let's imagine broadly, and maybe there's an opportunity to share here of what are things doing, or maybe things that you know others are doing that can help build in sustainability.
So, as I think about sustainable strategies, one of when I have done research recently, one was called Each One Reach One, is a research project around peer mentoring. It was really important for me to provide like some type of of compensation for the time that these women were spending, because it was specifically around faculty women of color. And but the way the grant was written, it wouldn't allow, and because we're publicly funded, you're not allowed
Mhm.
to provide, but so much pay for someone's involvement. So that became a real struggle for me because I didn't want to dishonor their participation with the $25 gift card. That was the max that I could give them, right?
Hmm.
And so I think that when we're thinking about how do we create these structures that we know our students need to have, and we try to find the research that supports what we know our students need. I struggle with how do we do that because as I said, I was so offended by that, and I apologized and I said, listen, in my original grant I wrote down $400 for each participant to compensate you for your stories and for your time. But because we are publicly funded, this is what we are required to do. And they were so understanding. And the value then became how do they change and shift things? And how do they grow from this experience? So I don't know if that adds any value or not, but that was just kind of what came to mind when you were talking about ways to do that in terms of creating a sustainable plan of action for work that you're doing.
Dr. Handy, you bring up such a good point in terms of the the barriers that are coming up in grants or different policies, or that, you know, a similar related version of that, when you're going through the ethics process and what you can and cannot do. Um, so the the point that you shared there about being very open and honest sounds like it built some really good relationships and, yeah, transparency about this is how it is.
Right, but it also helped me establish trust, right?
Yes.
And which I thought was really important because I didn't want anyone to think, and the same thing was true when I did my dissertation research years ago on the lived experiences of Black female students at private schools. It was so important for me not to just to be really respectful of the voice and of their experience and to carry it. I consider myself carrying it forward. Um, and so I think that's really important. Yeah.
Trust, yeah. When I was thinking like relationships, I was like, I'm like counselor brain, right?
Right.
Trust. It's a huge part of that. Um, One thing that I did as part of like I said, the ethics process is, always interesting. And um, my ethics process took a long time, because I had to go through my school plus, well, my university plus additional ones to be able to share the recruitment information for students at other schools, and to ensure that, especially with doing online research, that I was recruiting legitimate participants. So I had to give a lot of thought to how I was going to do recruitment and do it in a way that was secure and actually reaching students. Faculty were much easier to reach, but the reaching students was more difficult. And the learning and teaching I view as interchangeable, which is why I view both, right? So really drawing on Freire's work and others about we're learning and teaching simultaneously, whether we're the educator or the student, we're wearing both hats, regardless of what role we have. And one thing that with the compensation, and that's where having award funding was huge for me, was I was able to compensate the research participants and I was very intentional about where that compensation, the form of the compensation. So I created a list of e-gift cards, but they were all social entrepreneurs. So it was different online bookstores, different like wellness stores, primarily Indigenous women-owned stores, um, some fabulous um, online bookstores as well. So really, um, these different social entrepreneurs, um, that was where to support those. And the research participants noticed it. So when I sent them the list after they had participated, they're like, wow, I really appreciated that your e-gift cards reflect social justice.
I think that's amazing. And I put in the chat choice on one end, but also supporting marginalized merchants on the other end.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, we're
I
right
have
at,
I
we're
have
right
this
at three
great
minutes.
list.
I know, I love that. We're right at 3 minutes. It's 2:12. And I just wanted to let you know, Rose, that the Dr. Evan Smith is in the room. He is the name on the award that you
I
received. I
know.
know. So, Dr. Smith, would you like to say a word or two before we get into questions and answers?
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, Dr. Evan Smith. Thanks
Hi.
for
Hi.
dropping by.
Yes, I'm sorry I came in late, but I've been navigating the system. I'm very glad to see the fruits of your labor and my labor. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for your work.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks for your support. And
Well, this has
it's a
been very
huge honor.
yes,
Of
it is.
course.
And this has been such an amazing presentation and demonstration of your commitment to this work around creating an equitable learning space, right? And so I think that you have done an amazing job, and I can't wait to see what you do when you finally finish your degree and walk across that stage. I want you to keep us in mind when you do that, Rose, so we can rally around and support you. So right now, thank you. And I'd like to open the floor for questions. We have about a minute.
And
If
while
not,
folks think of questions, I just want to say again, thank you so much. It was such an honor to have received this award. It's, yeah, it supported some great work. I'm obviously very biased, but
but
it's
I love that what you did, I love the continuance of it, right? And from beginning to end, you have stayed true in spite of how things are changing in the world. And so we honor you for that and we thank you for that. And we hope that everyone will join us at our next session. And that brings us to the end of our session. A huge thank you to Rose. Please do not forget to fill out the conference feedback form, and we will hope to see you at another session throughout the conference. And I'm going to try to throw that in the chat if you give me a second. And
and
there's,
if anyone has follow-up questions for me, you're welcome to email me. My contact information is here on the slide, but I can also add it into the chat. So if you
yeah,
have additional questions we didn't get to, or things that pop up after the fact, I'm happy to share more.
I am popping that form in the chat. All right, everyone. Again, thank you, Rose. We really enjoyed your presentation, and we look forward to seeing what else you do next. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone, for attending. Bye.